Everybody knows that Disney's Sleeping Beauty was inspired by a messed up fairy tale. But which one? According to the film's opening credits, it was adapted from a French tale written by author Charles Perrault in 1697, titled La Belle au Bois Dormant, Sleeping Beauty, with hints of inspiration taken from another version of the story collected and published by the Grimm brothers in 1812 called Little Briar Rose. Now here's where things get kind of awkward. When I originally covered the messed up origins of Sleeping Beauty more than 7 years ago, I opted to ignore both of those stories for one that I thought was more messed up, called Sun, Moon, and Talia.
Oh dear, what an awkward situation.
And while that video is still a perfectly fine retelling of that particular story, it wasn't the true messed up origin for Sleeping Beauty. That's where today's episode comes in. We're going to explore not only these stories by the Grimms and Perrault, but some of the weirder elements of other variants as well, because I read all 9 versions of the story I could find that have English translations, and I would really like if that wasn't a complete waste of time. Remember to like and subscribe to have more messed up stories sent to your sub box every Thursday or Friday if you're one of our podcast listeners, and enjoy the messed up origins of Sleeping Beauty. One detail that nearly all the Sleeping Beauty stories have in common, including the film, is that they open by introducing a couple that is madly in love and incredibly eager to become parents. Then, through a little hope and prayer, their wish is granted by their god. The movie also adds that the princess was named Aurora because, like the dawn, she filled their lives with sunshine. Funnily enough, though, the Grimm's version makes no mention of a higher power, which is unusual considering how preachy some of their stories can be. What they do include, though, is a messenger to deliver the good news. While the queen is enjoying a bath, a crab crawls out of the drain, or in some versions it's a frog, and tells her that her wish has been granted and she's going to have a daughter. The strange thing is, the same thing happened to my wife. Now, just like the king in the movie, the fairy tale king throws a kingdom-wide celebration in honor of his new perfect princess, and he invited everyone. Well, almost everyone. I don't think the movie ever explicitly states why Maleficent wasn't invited. The only explanation we get is some iconic Merryweather sass.
You weren't wanted.
But it's pretty easy to infer why the king and queen wouldn't want a woman who has no reservations about dooming a newborn baby to die around their baby. The conflicts in Perrault and Grimm's versions are pretty similar, with the king inviting all the fairies in the kingdom except for one. But not because she was evil. Nope, it was solely because there weren't enough fancy plates, and he didn't want to insult the last fairy by giving her anything less, so he just left her out entirely. As you can imagine, the 13th fairy was not happy about her exclusion, so, like Maleficent, she crashed the party in the midst of the other fairies, bestowing their gifts of virtue, beauty, and so on to give a gift of her own. She declares that during the princess's 15th year on Earth, she'll prick her finger on a spindle and die. Now, to those wondering why a spindle specifically, I can only theorize, but to do that, I gotta go back to the Disney version. Personally, I like the interpretation that Maleficent's exclusion is a metaphor for the helicopter parents who try to protect their children from all the world's evils instead of preparing them, and how this only succeeds in making them more vulnerable. I think that interpretation is only strengthened by the fact that Prince Philip, who we see has been given enough autonomy to roam around the woods without a bodyguard, is ultimately the one who has to slay the dragon and save the princess. Meanwhile, the sheltered princess was comatose thanks to something as harmless as a spindle, which most common women at that time were expected to know how to use. As for the original fairy tale, while the reasons for not inviting the angry fairy can vary depending on which version you're reading, the parents usually respond to the curse or prediction in the same way, regardless of the culture. They destroy every spindle and spinning wheel in the kingdom. kingdom, which is just another example of the parents' hopeless attempt to make the whole world safe, when in reality they could have just explained to their daughter why touching a spindle would be dangerous. Fortunately, in both the story and movie, the final fairy uses her gift to alter the curse so the princess doesn't die, but instead falls into a deep sleep. In the fairy tale, it's a century-long sleep, but Disney made it indefinite and added the cure of true love's kiss. The movie's king also pushes the overprotectiveness even further by sending Aurora to an isolated cabin in the woods, where she's raised by the fairies for the next 16 years and lives under a fake name, Briar Rose, no doubt a reference to the Grimms. And I'm sorry to keep disrupting the flow of the story, but I gotta mention there's an Italian version called Sun, Pearl, and Anna, where the king doesn't have all the spindles destroyed, but really should have. Instead, when an astrologer warns him about his daughter's cursed fate, his response is to have his servants build a house underground, where the princess can be raised in isolation with a nursemaid. And here's where that king shows just how much of a dumbass he is. He allows the nursemaid to bring a spindle and distaff into the underground house. That would be like building a bomb shelter and then hanging a frag grenade over your bed. Like, what was the point of all that preparation if you still chose to give yourself a non-zero chance of being blown to bits? Anyway, getting back to the story, unlike the Disney adaptation, the princess is not forced to spend her entire childhood in isolation in either the Grimm or Perrault variants. She just lives in the castle with her parents. But one day, about 15 years later, the parents have to leave the castle on some royal business, and she's left unattended. I'd imagine her servants were still there, but for the first time in her life, the princess had free reign to explore the castle. As she wanders around the castle grounds, she stumbles upon a part of the castle that she'd never seen before. It was a small, tucked-in passageway that connected to a tower with stairs spiraling upward, which reminds me of the secret passageway that Aurora is lured into by Maleficent. Up the stairs she went, and at the top of the tower was an old woman spinning flax, which I find confusing considering the king's ban on spinning more than a decade prior. Maybe this is the one person he made an exception for after realizing how impractical it was to source all of their textiles from other kingdoms. Or she could be there for emergencies, like if the king tore his pantaloons, but her existence created a whole different kind of emergency.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Now, I can't blame the princess for being curious about the spinning wheel, considering she'd never seen anything like it before. The old woman asked her if she wanted to try it, and she said yes. But apparently she picked it up by the needle or something, because the moment she touched it, she pricked her finger and passed out. But it wasn't just the princess that fell asleep. The entire kingdom had apparently heard Jigglypuff's swan song because they fell asleep in the middle of what they were doing. In the movie, it's the three fairies who put everyone to sleep in hopes of sparing them the pain of losing the princess, but the Grimms didn't bother to give an explanation, at least not in their earliest edition. Perrault provided a strange and wonderful explanation though. In his version, a single fairy puts the whole kingdom to sleep after a dwarf wearing 7-league boots sprints across the country to tell her about the tragedy. We should give that dwarf credit too, because while his magic boots certainly made the trip easier, the fairy was 12,000 leagues away, so he still had a bit of a jog. Honestly though, as a new parent, I'm a little jealous of all the sleep that the princess is about to get. Fortunately, today's sponsor Helix Sleep has stepped in to help. If you're not getting proper sleep, then there's no way your body and mind are functioning at their best. Sleep allows us to organize our memories, process our emotions, and for our bodies to heal up from all the stress that we put them through. That's why Helix Sleep has been my go-to mattress brand since we got our first mattress from them back in 2021, because from the very first night, it was clear they were made with a whole new level of quality in mind. You see, Helix mattresses are customized to fit your specific needs, offering a huge variety of more than 20 unique mattresses along with a range of mattress toppers. They have a sleep solution for everyone, and they make picking out your mattress a breeze with their sleep quiz. Just take 30 seconds to tell them about your body type, ideal sleeping position, and where you need support, and they'll find your perfect match. Then they'll ship it to your front door with free shipping in the US. Many of you know that I have chronic back pain from a weightlifting injury, but I rarely think about that nowadays because my Midnight Lux mattress offers the perfect amount of lumbar support, and I wake up with my body feeling great. And I'm not the only one. According to a Wesper Sleep study, 82% of participants saw an increase in their deep sleep cycle after switching to a Helix mattress, achieving an average of 25 more minutes of deep sleep per night. And trust me when I say that every one of those minutes counted during my daughter's newborn phase. Whether you're looking to enhance your current mattress with one of Helix's new mattress toppers, like the premium memory foam topper that we just got, or you're trying to replace your mattress entirely, you could go to helixsleep.com/Jon Solo. There you can take advantage of the exclusive partner discount of 27% off the entire site, and a free bedding bundle with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. Again, that's helixsleep.com/Jon Solo. Link is in the description and pinned comment. There's an interesting inversion with the obstacles surrounding the castle. In the movie, Maleficent conjures up the thorniest hedges you've ever seen to try and stop the prince from reaching the castle and saving the princess with a true love smooch. But Perrault described the foliage as an impossibly thick forest with no way to enter. In his story, it's also a product of the good fairy. Because it was a 100-year sleeping spell and not one that could be broken, the kingdom had to be kept safe from outside threats. I believe the thorns were taken from the Grimm's version, but they don't explain why the hedges grow, although they do make a point to mention that anyone who tried to pass through them would get attacked by these seemingly sentient vines and thorny branches and died miserably. It takes an entire century before the Chosen One comes along to save the day. They scrapped the 100-year element for the movie, but they do reference it in a powerful monologue that I don't think I can use the sound from because of copyrighted music behind it. Maleficent is talking shit to the imprisoned prince and says she's going to set him free in a century or so. Then he's welcome to save Princess Aurora. Now, I think we can all agree that Philip's rescue of Aurora is the most exciting part of Sleeping Beauty. I'm pretty sure the writers of Maleficent hated men because they made the prince a useless putz, but in the original film, he's a proper hero. The fairy tale's prince is back to being unimpressive though. There's nothing wrong with him, he just doesn't do anything impressive to earn the princess's hand. Because those thorns that killed a dozen men without bias or remorse just turned into flowers when he walked by. Kinda cheap, isn't it? And there weren't any dragons to slay either. He just had to make his way past all the unconscious people in the castle until he found the tower where the princess was sleeping. And I am happy to report that unlike the king from Sun, Moon, and Talia, the Grimm's prince does not impregnate the princess while she's unconscious. But he does kiss her, which broke the sleeping spell on her and everybody else. Perrault didn't even take it that far. He just made the princess wake up as soon as the prince walked in. Another detail unique to Perrault is that he actually addresses the 100-year time lapse in a kind of hilarious way. Because when you think about it, if somebody slept for 100 years, they would surely wake up with an appetite, right? Well, Perrault says the princess's cravings were satiated by the power of love. But the rest of the kingdom was not love drunk, so they were hungry as hell. He also adds that while the prince was truly enamored with the princess's natural beauty, he couldn't help but laugh at her seriously outdated clothes. He was pretty sure he'd seen his grandma wearing the same thing. But he had the good sense not to say the quiet part out loud. Now, both the Grimms and the writers at Disney thought that this was the perfect moment to give the prince and princess their happily ever afters. But Perrault and storytellers from a number of other countries thought they could suffer just a little bit more. They gave us a whole extra act and a brand new villain with some seriously demented cravings. So in Sleeping Beauty stories where there is an Act 2, after the prince and princess get married, the prince pretty much always wants to keep their marriage a secret, though his reasons why depend on the version. You might remember that in Sun, Moon, and Talia, the king hides the relationship because he's married already, but in all the rest, the prince is hiding her from his mother, the queen. He ends up on his mom's bad side because he keeps leaving his responsibilities behind to go on mysterious hunting trips. And then, when his mom learns he's actually shagging it out with his secret lover, whom he had kids with, she becomes furious and decides she wants to eat them. I don't know why these evil queens always resort to cannibalism. Maybe it's symbolic for the Devouring Mother archetype. Charles Perrault might have thought this was a pretty extreme response as well, because the way he wrote the story is that the prince's mom is actually an ogre. A reformed ogre who didn't eat humans anymore. But rumor had it, she had a hard time resisting children. Apparently they're a delicacy, so that's why the prince hid his family from his mom. Sadly though, the prince couldn't keep his secret forever. His mother found out, because mother always finds out. And she sent the prince's most trusted servant to deliver a letter to her daughter-in-law, summoning she and the children to the castle under false pretenses. Now here's where things get really dark. First, the princess sends her firstborn, and the queen hands the child off to the cook, with orders to kill the child and make a fine meal out of them. A meal that, depending on the version, she either eats in front of the prince, or she tricks the prince into eating himself. Then she does the same with the second child. You can see why Disney decided to leave this part out. Finally, the queen summons her daughter-in-law, and boy does she have a surprise prepared. When the princess arrived at what she thought was her new home, she was ambushed by the queen and her guards. Her husband was nowhere to be found, and in the middle of the courtyard was the execution floor. As you might imagine, the particular method of execution varies depending on the version. Usually it's a cauldron of boiling oil or a bonfire, but Perrault filled the cauldron with venomous snakes. The queen revealed to the princess that she was still picking bits of her children out from between her teeth. Then she ordered her guards to throw the princess in the cauldron, after she strips out of her clothes because they looked expensive and the queen wanted them for herself. The princess, wanting to prolong her final moments as much as possible, took her sweet time getting undressed, and as a way to get her husband's attention, made a bunch of noise while doing so. Sometimes by ringing the bells that were sewn onto each layer of her dress, or by screaming. Again, depending on the version, the prince might not even be at the castle at this point. He could have been away fighting a war, on a real hunting trip, or sick in bed. Regardless of the reason, every version has one thing in common. He shows up at the nick of time. Now take a moment to imagine the scene that he walked in on. His wife is almost naked, surrounded by soldiers and a variety of deadly traps, and his mom, who remember in some versions is an ogre, is standing over it all, clearly orchestrating the whole thing. I don't know how I'd react to that, and I'm glad that I'll probably never find out. The prince was furious though. He took command of the guards, told them to unhand his wife and to execute his mother in whatever horrible way she tried to kill his beloved. At least that's usually how the story goes. Perrault didn't want any blood on his heroic character's hands, so he made the Ogre Queen throw herself in the cauldron in a fit of rage. Interesting choice. But the story is not over yet. Or did you forget about the kids, you monster? You're as bad as the Ogre Queen, you know that? When the princess relayed to the prince that the cook had killed their children, the prince ordered for him to be executed as well. But the cook said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, this is all a misunderstanding. I didn't kill your children, I killed your kids. Like, your goats? My wife is watching your children at my house. Is that really how little you think of me? We grew up together, Derek. You know me better than that." Or maybe you don't anymore. I'd be lying if I said I could remember the last time we had a conversation that didn't start with, "Make me some bonbons." You know I can make other things, right? Like I'm not even a pastry chef? And another thing, why don't you ever... The cook went on like that for a while. He forgot he wasn't the main character. The point was that the prince and princess's children were still alive, and only a little bit traumatized by their grandma. But who isn't? Now the question is, what can we learn from Sleeping Beauty? I think my earlier point that this is a story about the importance of anti-fragility still holds true, at least with most versions of the story. It's impossible to shelter your child from all the pain and suffering in the world, and if you try, all you're doing is guaranteeing that they'll be too fragile to handle whatever disaster inevitably strikes, so delicate that something as small as pricking their finger on a needle will take them out. But I think the story's final act teaches a different lesson. Be wary of your in-laws because they're selfish, child-devouring monsters. Nah, I'm kidding. Kinda. What do you think the lesson is? Let me know in a comment. Also tell me if you want to see a part 3, because there are still more Sleeping Beauty stories out there, and some are even stranger than this. Until next time, my name is Jon Solo, and remember, Jon shot first.